What's up, everyone? I'm Jackie.
And I'm Lindsay.
And we are Women Leaders in Sports Medicine.
Here to help you grow your game and own your game.
Today we have the pleasure of chatting with athletic trainer and owner of ATvantage Athletic Training, Alisha M Pennington. We discuss more than her journey into working as an athletic trainer and her current work in finding employment for other athletic trainers, but also the unspoken challenges of working in professional sports, the importance of professionalism and confidence in gaining referrals towards your higher level goals, and qualities she looks for in an athletic trainer. If you want more information about the network, head over to www.womenleadersinsportsmedicine.com. As always, thank you for joining, and we hope you enjoy listening in.
Hi again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Women Leaders in Sports Podcast. We are super grateful to have with us today the owner of ATvantage and athletic trainer, Alisha M Pennington. Alisha, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you on. Yeah, we're slowly getting into the athletic training field. So we were just super happy you responded and you've been able to join us today. So let's jump right in. What has this time off kind of been like for you? Because I know we were talking about this before we hit recording. It's been a little weird for everyone, but if you could just touch on that for our listeners.
Yeah. So our business is primarily a staffing company. So we focus on placing athletic trainers majorly in secondary schools, so the high schools, and we're mostly in California. So when this pandemic came, obviously California, one of the earliest and strictest to close. And naturally, I was concerned as a small business, just like anybody else would have been. What I'm super grateful for is I kind of started getting on the phone with all of our clients right away, knowing that the school districts were staying funded. The governor had announced pretty immediately that even though the schools were going to be closing, he was going to continue their funding. So I basically called all of our clients and asked them to honor the fullness of the contract so that we could continue to pay our athletic trainers. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful and humbled by the fact that pretty much all of them said yes.
Amazing.
And so, yeah, I think it's a testament to the role that the athletic trainer plays in athletics and on campus. And it also speaks to the relationships, not only that we as a business have with them as clients, but also, what those athletic trainers are doing every single day, the importance that the clients see of them. So in many ways, things slowed down, just like for everybody else. But we were able to keep people paid, which also meant that we were able to keep the lights on, which we're also tremendously grateful for. Outside of that, we've kind of stayed busy with a sister company that we started at the beginning of the year. So I have a podcast. I've had one for several years. And so at the beginning of the year, we kind of branched off and created an entire, like I said, sister company, which is ATvantage Academy, that puts out a lot of continuing education for athletic trainers, specifically in the space of business, because it's not something that we're formally educated or trained on in undergrad, or I should just say in school, because it's not going to be undergrad anymore.
No.
Yeah.
I've got to switch my lingo. So we stayed really busy developing education modules. One of the ways that we really benefited from the slowdown is that many of our contributors and other educators suddenly had a lot of free time on their hands to be recording webinars and doing interviews. So again, I'm really thankful that I was able to stay busy, because I know just like the mental side of things was kind of tough for people. It's one thing to have the cash flow coming in, but if you're just sitting around and twiddling your thumbs, that can also be very difficult.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure through the academy, the individuals who had more time to contribute also appreciated you reaching out to them and asking for them to contribute too. But
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, great doesn't even do it justice, but that's great that the school systems continue to support your athletic trainers, because again, I know when I was in high school, my athletic trainer was like my best friend. He was always there when something went wrong. I was like, oh, fix me. So anyway, this is actually a pretty good segue into our next question. Sorry, Jack, I'm going to steal your thunder a little bit.
No, you're fine.
But so one thing we like to start our podcast off with is you just giving our listeners a little bit of insight as to your why of going into athletic training. And I guess if you want to touch on too, even to the business side a little bit as well. But yeah, what's your why?
Oh gosh, thank you for asking this question.
Yes.
I'm really big on why. It's funny. I didn't even know what athletic training was when I went to college. I was actually a social work major.
Oh.
I didn't have exposure to athletic training in high school. But my mom was in the medical field, and I was always intrigued by the human body and science. And I knew that I wanted to help people. So I actually went to school as a social work major and got exposed to sports medicine. And, the industry of athletic training is so unique in that you're able to practice healthcare in a non-healthcare, quote unquote, setting. A lot of that is changing now. We are trying to better align ourselves as a profession with more healthcare industry standards, because we want the recognition that a lot of other healthcare providers get. And we haven't historically had it because we've kind of towed the line between two different industries, athletics and healthcare. And so when I was going into athletic training, a lot of it is part of the environment, the setting that really attracted me, wanting to be outside, wanting to work in fast-paced settings, wanting to be with people who always wanted to get better. That was kind of what attracted me to it. And I think what keeps me there really are the relationships. I, like you guys, I'm sure, like we're people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, when you see that person return back to sport, or, so much of their identity is in this, and to be an instrumental role in their return to it, or just their continued activity in it, is so rewarding. And for us as personnel, because we travel with them, like you said, you're texting them, you're calling them, we're so intimately involved in the lives of these people, and sometimes in very vulnerable situations, that I think that that's part of the fulfillment that many people in our industry, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way, that you get in wanting to stay involved and be part of the industry and the profession. And related to my business, I've actually taken a big step back from the clinical side of it. And my focus is a lot more on the advocacy, the progression of the profession, bringing topics to light that oftentimes we don't get to talk about, like business and how to negotiate and how to represent ourselves. And really my focus with the business, obviously outside of the business model, is really just how do we do a better job of being who we are? So, like, how can we practice authentically in ways that speak to us? So whether that's, I want to be a stay-at-home mom and don't want to feel forced out of the profession because of it, or I want to be able to travel the world and not have to commit to any one specific team or thing. Yeah, I just want to be able to come and go. And so with starting a staffing company, I'm able to source and provide unique opportunities that give people permission to practice in the ways that they want to practice. Because I think that's, in my experience, a lot of what was lacking in how I wanted to go about my practice. It didn't look the way that people said it should. And there was a lot of shaming associated with that. So it really, I think the why for me behind the business side of it is I want to let people practice. Like I feel, and I'm sure you guys are the same way. It's like you came into this profession and you want to be a part of it for a reason. And sometimes the way that you go about conducting that business looks different. And I think that there should be space to do that.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot to relate to in your why. One, I think a lot of us, AT and PT, S&C, whatever, like we get into these like allied fields and sports medicine fields because of the relationship building we're able to have. And like just seeing the process of coming from like feeling at their lowest point sometimes to like building up together. I mean, it's such an incredible moment to have with your athlete or client. And so I definitely relate to that too. Cause I remember if I'm going back to when I was starting to decide what I wanted to do, I was kind of between like MD, like ortho or PT. And I just was like, well, like they don't get to spend time with their patients. Like the relationships you see build for those longer periods are amazing. And then I love your vision for your business. I think it is such an important thing to be working on. And I think as our society grows and as all of our profession grows, it doesn't look like what it traditionally used to look like, right? We're finding there's more creativity and more different areas and more levels of importance for people that it just doesn't look the same. And I think a lot of people don't know how to come about that. So I just remember talking with you earlier and I was like, yes, like that is what we need in this world are people who bolster each other up and build each other up and create these opportunities. So I think what you're doing is amazing. Love it. So I'd love to get into a little bit more about you. And I'd love to have you kind of touch on your journey as to where you came from and how you got to owning your own business.
Yeah. So I finished so I did my undergrad at Florida State. That was early mid 2005 to 2009. And then I did my grad work at Cal State Fullerton. So I was finishing at Cal State Fullerton in 2011. We were still in the recession at that point. There was not a lot of full-time jobs available, especially in athletic training. And the jobs that were available, they didn't speak to me. I was interviewing and I was taking the interviews, but there was nothing really that was kind of jumping out to me. And so I basically decided to freelance. I didn't know that it was called freelancing at the time. This is hindsight that I'm putting that label on it, but I just started taking odd and end jobs, covering a tournament here, doing a little part-time work there. And at the time, it was mostly just listservs. So I was an alumni of Cal State Fullerton. There was Chapman University that had a separate listserv. There was Long Beach that had a listserv. And so what would happen is there would be a local tournament that came into the area. They would send an email to Cal State Fullerton's program director and say, hey, do you have anybody that can work? And they would blast that out to the listserv. And so I had started picking up jobs here and there, and I was able to string together enough gig work that was bringing me some consistent income. And then as the economy kind of started to pick up a little bit more, there would be multiple gigs on the same day. So I was already booked. I had picked something up. And so I would tell my friend, like, hey, so-and-so's looking for an athletic trainer. Do you want to go out and work it? Yeah, sure. Okay, let me connect the two of you. So that kind of grows a little bit. And then it gets to a point where I'm like, my friend circle is kind of tapped into, and, the tournaments and the gigs, they're continuing to come more and more. So I kind of started a little website that was, I liken it to a Craigslist. So I would get something that would come through. I'd put it up on the Craigslist. I had just started telling people like, hey, go to this website, whatever I get, I'm going to post there. You guys just kind of like fend for yourselves. That was working okay until, what happened was people started undercutting each other. So let's say the job was paying $25 and Joe got it. Well, Sally would see the post 30 minutes later, and she would call the client and say, hey, I can work it. Sorry, Jody grabbed it. Well, if I would work it for $24, would you take me? Okay, yeah, sure, I'll take. And so unfortunately, I had, people were really eager. And when the economy is tough, you're willing to take $1 less per hour if you're guaranteed that income. Yeah. So I kind of had to pull that down, and I was at a crossroads at that point. It was either, be done with this, just let the business serve me because I was getting plenty of work. What was going on out there wasn't my problem, really. I could have just taken the website down. But I decided that at that point that I wanted to insert myself kind of as a middleman, if you will. And because when I would go out to these gigs, I would see, there was no water, or there was no things that should be in place in order to practice safely, or for the athletic trainer when they go out there, to reduce liability for us, because you go and you show up and there's no water. It's like, okay, I'm going to deal with a bunch of heat exhaustion now.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Oh my goodness.
Exactly. Yeah. So really, I saw an opportunity for myself to advocate on behalf of our profession to these clients, and then simultaneously start educating athletic trainers about what are the things that you should be asking for or looking for, and also, like, how can you negotiate for that? So I started a little business. And at that time, it was called the ATC Agency, which I thought was so...
It's super catchy. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I like it. It's got a little ring to it.
It had a little ring to it. And so 8 months later, I got a cease and desist order from the BOC, which is our credentialing body, because ATC is like reserved trademark. And so, I'm 8 months into business, and I get the scariest letter in the mail, and I'm thinking,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was, I'm thinking, this is the end. Who did I think that I was? All the things. So I switched it at that point. So this would have been going into 2013 now, to the Advantage, and we've kind of been ATvantage or Advantage ever since. And so in starting that and inserting myself, what was created as a result was an opportunity for me to do those things that I said, kind of advocacy on the client side and education, and then sharing business topics and understandings with the athletic trainer. So very shortly after, we got our first school district client, and that came as a result of a referral. And at that point, we were just in youth sports. We were doing tournaments, gig stuff. We hadn't really considered or looked at any type of ongoing placement of an athletic trainer. And when that first school district came, it just completely opened my eyes to California has the lowest rate of athletic trainers in the secondary school setting, and one of the largest amounts of high schools in the country. So I thought, oh, wow, here's a business model.
Yeah, you found it. There you go.
Exactly. Yeah. Kind of fell in my lap. And so we've kind of been growing and establishing more and more positions for athletic trainers in the high schools in California. But really the ideal situation is that we're able to hand those contracts over to the school districts. So we've successfully converted 14 of our positions over to full-time district positions over the last 4 to 5 years. Yeah. So we carry anywhere between 30 to 40 positions in any given year. And we're usually able to convert between 2 and 3 of them. So over time, we're kind of able to create that as a model for us. And shedding some of those allows us to pick up some of the other ones. So it's a nice kind of ability for us to do that. And so, now I'd say we're at a point where we kind of have a reputation in the industry that, we do the right thing. We're not the cheapest in the market. You're not going to get inexpensive services from us. We have really high requirements for clients to work with us. We have to have promises of policy and procedure to be implemented. We have to have workspaces for the athletic trainer available. We need to have budgets for supplies. There's a lot of things that we try to put in place for the athletic trainer. And then everything else that I do or that we've done, like, the sister education company that we started, it's all just kind of spawned from there. When we're having conversation with athletic trainers or with clients, and I'm realizing, athletic trainers need more formal education or understanding in how to negotiate, or what is the difference between an independent contractor and an employee and the representation of that. And so everything else just kind of snowballs as a result of that work.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's cool because like your business, like your end game business was integrated into you at the beginning, like your passion for what you do, but your passion for people is very clear. Like, and just like helping people in different ways. I think what you were doing from the very beginning, and just even thinking about like, hey, maybe I should like start this thing for my friends and let's just build this out to like a bigger circle. I think you've always had that vision of not only helping your patient and your client, but taking like the mentality of what we do in AT or PT or whatever, and applying it across the board. So I think, your mission really and what you're doing is huge, because on the other side, like from our perspective, I'm very fortunate to have like a strong athletic training community around me for the athletes that I work with too. But that's not the case for everyone in California. And I'm in LA, and I just feel like that's absurd.
Totally.
So the idea of like not having an athletic trainer to work with or be able to transition care to or chat with or whatever is terrible. So I think, you being able to start building that in an area that needs it so much is amazing.
And it's interesting that you say that, because the physicians that we work with and other physical therapists or school nurses, they're always so appreciative of that athletic trainer being placed there, because like you said, oftentimes they've been in situations where they have nobody that they can transfer the care to. The physician isn't nearly as comfortable clearing that kid for concussion, knowing there's maybe an EMT on the sideline that shows up for the game, but there's no one else out there. So not only is it, the importance of care in the acute of being able to respond and manage situations and obviously the relationship building, but like you said, that interprofessional work and that level of like security of, being able to transfer that care and for the athletic trainer to refer out as well, for us to have those relationships with the physical therapist, the school nurse, the physicians, it's huge. I mean, and just take away one of those pieces of the puzzle and the whole thing crumbles.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And I think you touched on, I want to dive into your journey a little more, but before we do that, I think you touched on a really important point for our listeners that I know coming out of school, it was preached a little bit I preached a decent amount at USC, but not always at any program, whether it's athletic training, physical therapy, even like strength and conditioning, but how important it is to get involved in advocacy, because things you were mentioning where with the schools you contract your ATs to, it's important that they have, like you said, set policies and procedures and certain things so that everyone's successful. So you're not sending someone into the fire without the tools they need and whatnot. So that's just a little bit of a tangent. So if you're listening, try and get involved in any kind of advocacy in your field, because it is important.
Agreed.
Yeah. But going back into your journey a little bit, can you touch on for listeners, because you did say kind of how the whole school district thing started was a referral. So obviously when someone is referred to you or to anyone else in the field, it speaks volumes of your level of care you're giving to your athletes. Can you touch on some of the opportunities you had in your clinical career and maybe kind of how they came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. I actually think that the two are connected, right? So the advocacy speaks volumes to what opportunities are going to come your way. So everything that we do is a result of some type of networking. A lot of it is about who you know, but more importantly, it's who knows you.
Fair enough.
True, right? Yeah. Very true.
And so when I look back over my career and when I look at my resume, the things that are the standouts, the ones that people pay the most attention to, and I'll touch on them, have been the easiest to get. And that's sort of a right? So, and by the easiest to get, I mean, all of the work I had done up to that point allowed me to be in that position to walk through the door and it's waiting for me. So when you are someone who practices as a quality professional, when you are someone that has certain standards of care and levels of professionalism about you and what you bring to your work and how you interact with your clients, it speaks for itself. And you're so much more likely to get recommended or referred to higher level or more highly sought out opportunities, because that's what they're looking for at those high levels. You know, they want levels of confidentiality. They want levels of confidence. And so it's not always that you have to be the most skilled practitioner. I'm not the most skilled practitioner out there. It's who you show up as. Like, are you empathetic? Are you going to listen? Are you going to listen in confidence? Are you able to, keep information to yourself and to work in a way that gives that high level athlete the inference that you're safe, basically, right?
Yeah.
So one of the areas that I started to get involved in, so I started my business and I was still working full time at the high school. That was kind of the job that was paying the bills. I did that for 2 years. And over the summers, I was able to work with USA Beach Volleyball. That opportunity came to me by referral. And again, was not because I had the best hands in the job. It wasn't because I could tape the best ankle. It was because I showed myself as that quality professional. And that then parlayed me into USA Water Polo. And so between the two of those, they were opportunities that allowed me to travel the world, to travel domestically, to work one-on-one a lot of times with clients, to be one of the only practitioners traveling with one, sometimes two teams. Those are very difficult situations in some ways to be. There's a huge demand on you as the provider to do those. I went to Argentina with USA men's and women's water polo. And, that's 25, 30 athletes and I'm the sole provider and they're both competing. Yeah. I mean, 25 to 30 doesn't sound like a ton for, sometimes we work with football teams, but there's also a staff of us. And there's chiropractors and physical therapists and massage therapists. And sometimes when we travel, we're the only ones. So I'm super fortunate for those experiences because I learned how to be more efficient with, my hands or my time or acquiring different tools and skills that helped me to achieve quicker or better results for the patient without having to put such a taxing load on my body because I had a large patient pool that I had to care for. And those were like 2-week trips. So, I mean, it can be a long time where you're just right there, the only person for them. And then basically right after my business had grown. And so I was able to leave the secondary school. I was fully focused on just being full-time with my business. And probably within 2 weeks of making that decision and leaving, I got a call to join the staff of the television show, The Biggest Loser, as an athletic trainer. And again, it was a unique opportunity that came directly to me. And it was another one of those situations where they're seeking someone that can do this in confidence. They had some turnover and they needed to change things, and they needed people that could be trusted, honestly. I mean, there's no other way to say it, right?
Yeah.
And so again, showing yourself as that, it really, those are the things that you do on a day-to-day basis to pay it forward for yourself, so that when that opportunity comes, you're the name, or you're who they're thinking about to refer for that.
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of really good points there, and like weaving in how important professionalism is. I mean, I think that every program preaches that, right? Like, be professional, but you can still have a relationship with your patient or your client or whatever, as long as it's professional. But also touching on the point of like how important it is to kind of show up every day. And it's more so like, yes, you're showing up for your patients 100%, but you're also showing up for yourself. So like you said, when those doors open for an opportunity, you're already prepared, you're already ready, because you've already done some hard things before that. And I also appreciate you touching on how, I don't know if challenging is the right word, but how demanding it can be working with an Olympic team like that. Because again, maybe if you're not a physical therapist or an athletic trainer, if you've never seen kind of the model, when it's one athletic trainer to like even more than like 10 or 15 kids, that's a lot of work and a lot of pressure. So I just really appreciate you touching on that for our listeners.
Yeah. I think in my experience, there is a lot of clout, and there is a lot of desire, I'll just say, to reach these levels, these echelons of what we perceive to be, where it's at. I'll just say that. And then you get there and you realize, wow, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And what I thought it was going to be, in air quotes, meaning I don't have the work-life balance that I thought I was going to have, or I'm not respected as the professional that I thought I would be, or we don't have the multidisciplinary practice that I thought I would have access to, or as a professional, like I'm just not respected in the way that I thought that I was going to be. And it's funny because I think professionally, those people who work in the areas that get the most visibility, so the professional and on television, for some reason we aspire to that because we hold it in such regard. But truthfully, the quality positions are all underneath that. Like, when you think about the fulfillment that you'll experience in working with some of these in the patient relationships, the work-life balance, the respect for yourself as a professional, you can achieve that working at the local youth sports community center or working at the secondary school. And I don't feel like we give enough credit to those positions. We don't focus on those and really like the difference that they're making enough, because there's so much focusing on the visible ones, the ones that are on television.
I could go off on like a whole other thing about in athletic sports, because that's truly what I love to do. I love working at the high school and the youth level, because the impact you can have there, I think, is just bigger than just making someone move and perform better. It's way bigger than that. But anyway, I will not go off, and that can be a whole other thing. But at the same time, you've clearly had like tons of different experiences. And I think you have a really unique view, because now you're like on the staffing side and you're seeing athletic trainers coming onto your team to disperse them out. What do you look for when you're meeting some of these athletic trainers that you say, that's a great athletic trainer? Like, what are the qualities that you're really looking for that you're wanting to source these people out with?
So I think I would almost have to answer that question in two ways. So I think what makes a great athletic trainer is a little bit different than what we look for, because the opportunities that we provide are unique in that I want somebody who is seeking a work type, a work opportunity that is not traditional. So we want people that are looking for part-time work or only want to work for 3 months out of the year and then go travel the world. Or a lot of times they are multi-passionate. So they'll have their strength and conditioning certification, or they'll be personal trainers, or they're stay-at-home moms, or they've just got something else going on in their life. And so as a business, we kind of pride ourselves on identifying and recruiting, like I was saying earlier, people who would probably otherwise be discarded by the profession, otherwise pushed out, because these types of opportunities wouldn't exist for them. They would either be expected to practice in a very traditional full-time, commit your entire life to it capacity, or, we don't have space for you, or it's, go get a clinic job. A lot of people, even though they want more limited hours, they want more structured hours, they still want to be at the secondary school. And so coming and committing to 2 to 7 o'clock is enough for them. So I think who we look for and what we look for in our business is really those athletic trainers that need those unique opportunities, but also expressing to them the types of relationships that we have with our clients, and that we want to put people in there that are going to continue to perpetuate that messaging. So someone who's willing to have hard conversations, someone who's willing to stand up for themselves. We, year after year, want to leave that position better than when we came into it. So we need you to be actively seeking ways to improve either yourself as a professional, that as a position, the space, whatever it is. So we don't typically do well with people who are like complacent or, we challenge our clients to continually be getting better. And so we need athletic trainers that can be the conduit of that message in person for us. So that's kind of what we look for there. And I think, what makes a quality athletic trainer is a lot of what we've already talked about in terms of how you show up. But honestly, I think the difference between good and great is the work that you do with yourself. And you will show up differently as a result of that. So if you are self-aware, if you have emotional maturity, if you understand the things that make you tick. And so you can't be set off in a conversation, or you find yourself getting set off in a conversation, you realize you need to remove yourself. I think all of that, what you do personally and how you manage yourself is what shows up in you as a professional. And that's how you're able to get further along in life, honestly.
Yeah. Truth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a couple comments there. One, again, like I said before, I love what you're doing. I think there's such an importance for it, and being able to find unique roles for people that they're wanting to maybe a little bit different than the normal. On our last roundtable, for example, one of the questions was like, how do you work at the professional level and have a family? Like the fact that we have to have that conversation is hard right? too. Yeah. But there are those people who may be great in these roles, but shy away from them because it's not the norm, or they don't think they're going to get it, or they don't think it's possible. So I think the fact that you were creating basically that agency that's going to help a lot of those people is huge.
Just a comment too. I think there's not enough onus or emphasis, whatever the word you want to use is, that's put on you as an individual in the medical field on how important it is to, like you said, figure out kind of like what makes you tick, or figure out what sets you off in a negative way. Because when you're in school, or when you have this vision to whatever you want to be, you're so focused on the patient in front of you and your workload and making sure you're taking a Con Ed course, making sure you're doing this.
Yes.
And it's not to say those things are not important, because I've kind of realized this, and we've heard other fields as well say very similar things to what you're saying. But it's really important to take the time to self-reflect and, like you said, figure out what makes you tick, because at the end of the day, it's going to make you happier.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So when you're having a conversation about how to negotiate your salary, and so you think of it as very structured, very going to be one thing. But really what that comes down to is you have to be able and willing to remove emotion. You have to be willing to have a pointed conversation at really a business deal. You have to be able to not take what they say personally, because it's a lot of times it's not a reflection of you necessarily. It really is just dollars and cents. And so in a situation that you would otherwise think is very black and white, there is a lot of emotion and other things that are brought into that if you haven't done the work to make sure that you're not triggered, or to make sure that you're not showing up in a way that is not behoove of you as a professional, you could potentially damage that relationship. And I think to an extent, people know that about themselves, and that's why they're not willing to go into a negotiation. But then what happens is we get this perpetual cycle of we're not asking for more, but yet we're asked to do more. And then we're not valued as highly. And you go all the way down this cycle simply because, well, not simply, it's not simply, but because we're scared, we're intimidated to have that hard conversation. And it's not because it's hard, because the conversation is going to be hard, whether you have this self-awareness or not, but you lighten that burden on yourself. You make it less hard if you have the trust within your, like I was saying, level of emotional maturity, or just in the self-awareness of knowing yourself, that even if this is a hard conversation, even if they say things that I don't like, I know that I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm not, and so, when you look at, the reflection, the self-worth, there's so many different things that spawn off of it that you see, they represent themselves all across your life. But when you're specifically looking at your career and your professional life, it's very difficult to really excel, really get to all the things that you think in your mind that you want to get to if you're not doing that work.
Yeah. And I mean, this even works into another question we were thinking about. We were going to ask you, to be honest, but in terms of like communication, not even just with a boss, you might be negotiating with, but across like a multidisciplinary team. And I feel like you touched on a little bit of like tips and tools. Like, you need to know like how you're going to react if someone doesn't agree with what you have to say for the athlete, even if you 100% know you're right. Or maybe you also need to, if someone doesn't agree with you, take a step back and think, oh, wait, did I miss something? Like, I really need to take into account what they're saying and reflect on that before I come back at them with whatever that might be. So again, like those last like 2 to 3 minutes, everyone, you could actually really apply that to across a disciplinary routine too.
Absolutely.
So that kind of being said, you've done a lot of things, which I think is so cool for our listeners to hear, because one, it shows there's so many different things you can do in your field, right? And so many different ways to help people. And I mean, however you want to view this, but have you experienced maybe any like obstacles or challenges? And kind of more importantly, how do you feel like you were able to overcome them?
Great question.
I know. So, it's a very broad question too, but
no, I'm going to answer it in two ways, because a lot of times when this question gets asked, my own thinking goes to external challenges, things that have been imposed against me on what has made it hard for me to be quote unquote successful. But in my self-reflection, I've realized that I actually desire to answer this question in more of an intrinsic challenge way. So I'm going to answer it for both. Externally, I think that, okay, so being a female in this business, it's there, right? Like I'm going to call it for what it is.
Yep.
We'll just put that out there. I do think it's getting a lot better. I graduated from undergrad 11 years ago. So certainly in the last decade, we've come a long way. And so, but I will say, I had to leave where I did undergrad and come back to the West Coast in order to feel like I could achieve what I wanted to achieve. It was my impression that if I had stayed in the South, so I did my undergrad at Florida State, which is in Tallahassee, up in the Panhandle, basically South Georgia. When I was there, I did not get the impression that there was opportunity for women to excel. That was my impression. So I came back to the West Coast and I specifically went to a program that had a woman at the helm, Julie Max. She's a pioneer in athletic training. She was the first female president. Definitely feel like I got tremendous leadership skills from her and representation of what a woman could do in the profession. Moreover, I think, again, just going to call it for what it is. If you're good looking, they don't take you seriously. They see you as a threat. They're a lot less likely to give you the chance because they make assumptions about who you are as a professional. That was difficult to overcome. At the same token, there are certain industries where you'll only get looked at if you have a certain presentation about you. So I think especially as women, we are challenged to kind of toe that line of, like you said, we always show up as professionals, but there is this external interpretation of who we are based on how we look. And that sucks.
Yeah, it
but
does.
that was what it was. When I started my business, I was 24 years old. So I'm going to transition sort of what I just said into now more of my personal, my intrinsic challenges. I was having to go to school districts and pitch myself to school board members. And I had started to believe a lot of those things about myself. I'm a woman. I'm young. I won't be taken seriously. They don't see me as a professional. And so I would go into these pitches with all of that in my head. I had tremendous self-doubt. I wasn't walking in there confidently. And it showed. A lot of them would give me the feedback and say, you've got a great business model here, but you're not confident. Like, we don't trust that, to do business with you because you're hesitant. And that was really eye-opening for me, to see that, they were willing to do business with a young woman. And it was me who was hindering that, who was stopping that. And so I think it took me a long time to get to a place where I could take myself seriously in those situations. And I feel like that was a burden that I carried early on in the business side of things, that I probably created more work for myself than I needed to, because I had the voice in my head that, I don't have any formal education in business. Who do I think I am? And imposter syndrome all up and down, So I think the challenges were sort of twofold. And unfortunately, I let the one become another.
Yeah. I think people don't realize how much all of that external stuff that is so unfortunate really starts to impact you, like on a personal level, until you come into a growth situation. Like there's all these little subliminal messages everywhere that, like, just like you said, I'm a woman, I'm too young, I'm too pretty, I'm not pretty enough. I don't, I don't know enough. And we all hear it all the time when we tell ourselves in the moment, like, oh, that's not me. It's not me. And then all of a sudden we come in the situation of negotiation or discussion to grow yourself as a person or in your career. And all of a sudden, like all that stuff you told yourself didn't matters more than you ever thought.
Yeah. It's like the permanent talk track that's just on repeat, as you're walking into the office or exactly.
Yeah. So I think that tone of what we talked about of working on self-reflecting early and making that a priority and being able to look at the scary stuff too is so important for the young clinician, because I working and mentoring a lot, you hear self-reflection on clinical skills and conversation and how I dealt with a, difficult interaction with a patient. But you never talk about like, well, I felt this way because of this previous situation, or like somewhere in the world, someone told me I wasn't going to be able to do this, or I came from the South and, there I wasn't looked at as an equal in one way. So I think the tone of what you said, I think is really, really relatable to a lot of young clinicians coming out. And I think the fact that we're starting to have the conversation about this more openly, I think is going to help a lot of young women coming out of this, like start to feel like it's okay for me to feel like this. Now I got to deal with it. So thank you.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah. I think like you're saying, just kind of putting it out in the open, identifying the fact that it even exists, because like you said, it is subliminal messaging. And sometimes it's just so deeply rooted in the subconscious that you don't, when you go to have that negotiation or that interview or whatever, you're believing these things about yourself without being consciously aware of it until you do become consciously aware of it. And then you're like, well, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
You're like, where did that come from?
Yeah. I think another interesting thing, because we've had this kind of mentioned before, is it also shows up in different presentations. Like sometimes you don't have that moment of like, oh, I don't feel like I'm good enough. It shows up in like, wow, why am I so tired today? Or like, why do I feel like I can't get anyone better today? Or, you go home and you want to finish like a Con Ed course and it's like, wow, why can't I get motivated to finish this Con Ed course? So I'm like Jackie said, I just really appreciate you bringing those things up, because again, yes, is it getting better, but it's still at a point where these subliminal messages are still happening. So
yeah, absolutely. And, I like what you said, because I also think that there's like the opposite side. So it is like that kind of wear and tear on the mental status, but then there's the other side of it where we feel like we have to overcompensate for it. So we're becoming irrational, or we're, like in the interdisciplinary setting, we feel like we have to defend ourselves to the bone, because you're talking with a male PT and a male physician, and you just don't know necessarily, but you're thinking, I'm not being taken seriously because I'm a woman. And so you're right. There are so many different presentations of that. And a lot of times we're not aware of it in the moment. And it's hard because we're reacting in ways that we're subconsciously and subliminally told to act a certain way. And then it flares up in us. So you're spot on with that.
Yeah. And I think this next question just kind of ties into everything we've talked about with this podcast, and because you've had so many great experiences. But if you had to have a definition, what would your definition of success be? Or your vision of success? Like when you look back 40 years from now or 30 years from now?
It's joy.
Oh, I love it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, just made me so happy.
I do have a definition, and it is joy. And it's not even about looking back. To me, it is really about the practice every single day. And joy is obviously an emotion, and this is something that I've had to arrive at, because I am someone that every single day has to fight not wanting to achieve that next thing or have that next accolade or work towards that next blah, blah, blah that could go on my CV or my resume. I mean, when you talk about subliminal messaging, like that's something that's so ingrained in my brain of, how can I write this down as another title, another accomplishment, another whatever it is. And so in all of that work, I've realized that success and what there's a lot of facets of what joy can look like. But if I keep it as simple as that, if I let me being happy lead the way, and, when opportunities come to me, I can go into myself and say, how does this feel? I know that I'm going to go in the right direction. So, of course, there is financial stability, and there is the different environments and places I've been able to work and what I can put on my resume and what other people see as success. And I know that all of that has a role in it. But for me, every single day when I look in the mirror, the level of accountability that I want to myself is related to joy.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I know Jackie's going to want to comment on this too, because one, there's something to be said for just keeping it so simple. But two, that's so applicable to anyone in any field, because it starts, and again, we've touched on this throughout this whole podcast. So it's kind of cool that this ended up tying back the way it did. Right? Yeah. But it just comes back to showing up for yourself and identifying for yourself so that you can be happy in your career and satisfied with your career, but also satisfied with yourself. But Jack, did you want to comment on that at all? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alisha. You can go. Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's a way to stay accountable to you, right? So it's not something that is outside of your control. So for me, at least, I used to define success as, like I was saying, what I could put on the resume, that next job that I could get, the winning that award, securing that position. I'm not in control of any of that. And what I realize in going through that is I would have ups and downs and roller coasters of, I'm happy with my career, I'm unhappy, I'm fulfilled, I'm not fulfilled. And it all was because I was placing the importance on something outside of myself, outside of what I could control, what I could ensure that I was able to get. And so when I flipped all of that around and thought, if I truly want to have quote unquote fulfillment, if I truly want to have quote unquote success, then I have to be able to define it in a way that I can control. And so then going through that journey, it's not only does it arrive you at the place that you were just saying where you can ensure those things for yourself, but then it becomes that guiding light of, what do I say yes to? What do I say no to? What is a quality opportunity? What fits with where I'm at in my life right now? And it's malleable. It's way less rigid and strict in how you go about deciding what comes next for you.
Yeah, that's kind of something that I was thinking about too, is this idea of our motivations are very early in career appear to be very external, and you just can't create like a fulfilled life on something that's so external. And so like, I love asking like students and people like, well, what do you want? And it's always like, I want to work in the NFL. I want to work in the NBA. I want this job. I want this job. And it was like, no. Like, what do you want in your life, in your career? And when you start figuring that out and asking yourself those internal questions, then like you said, your gut and your intuition takes you on the journey that's for you, not for a journey for someone else, for you. And at the end of the day, like your hard work, your self-growth, that growth mindset will make other people know you. And I think we look at it so twisted the other way. Like, I gotta make people know me. I gotta make people know me. Yeah. But people clearly like found out who you are because of the passion you have, that you always followed your gut and you cared for people and you worked your butt off. You're going to be a confident, caring, and strong AT. So I think at the end of the day, that's like even a huge piece of advice for people too, is just being internal in your growth.
Absolutely. And I think that, to your point, even if, or even when you do get that NFL, NBA, whatever job, if that's all that you're focused on, once you get there, that's going to show, right? So when you were saying that, I'm thinking, let's just say as a clinician, you're focused on like patient outcomes. Like one of the things that I define as success is, the patient outcomes. Mm-hmm. So first of all, regardless of what setting you're in, you can achieve that. You don't have to be in the NFL, NBA, but even if you were at that level, if you're void of those types of things, if you haven't figured out what is my impact, what is the lasting legacy that I want to leave, what is it that I want people to walk away from feeling as a result of interacting with me, if you haven't thought about that, you're going to get those positions and you're going to be right back out of there because they see that, they feel that, they know that. So it's not even so much about where can I go with this or, to what ranks can it take me? It's also what can I be doing in the meantime? How can I be affecting people, showing up, doing all that here? But then once I get there, okay, so then what? And
so
that's
true.
Sometimes like that emptiness that people feel. They get to the NFL, they get to The Biggest Loser, they get wherever it is that they want to be, and they're empty. They think that just having that title is going to make them feel a certain way. But it doesn't. Like I've been there, I've done the journey, trust me, and like you said, as young clinicians, we all aspire for that. And I think that's part of the rhetoric that needs to change is that we, like I said earlier, we place greater value on those positions where you can make deep impact on populations that otherwise would have no access to healthcare providers. And we start to change that understanding of how you as a clinician can not only be representation of the profession, but how you can impact that community in a way that is going to feel fulfilling and meaningful to you, assuming that's what you want for your career, which I think most people do.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's a great thing to end with because for all the listeners out there, I hope they take away a lot. I mean, there's so many takeaways from this podcast, but really thinking about like what big picture, what you want your legacy to be and how you want to impact people throughout your career, not just the professional level or wherever you aspire to be to. And then on top of that, how is all of that going to tie together so that you feel fulfilled at the end of the day? Because again, you're not the first person we've spoken with that have made it to the top. And I'm not saying you felt this way 100% at all, but we had one person who 100% made it to her goal and she was there and like looked back and she was like, this is not where I want to be at all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But anyway,
exactly.
So thank you again so much for today. You've provided so much insight for listeners. And just because you have your own podcast and everything, if listeners want to find you, where can they do that?
Yeah. So I am on Facebook and Instagram at Alisha M Pennington. My first name is spelled Alisha. So you can follow me there. The podcast is very specific to athletic trainers, but you're welcome to check it out. It's the Business Advantage. That's ATvantage. And yeah, I'd love to have anybody. This honestly, I love your guys' platform. When Jackie and I were talking, it just is so much of the conversation that needs to be had. And it's not siloed to a single profession. Like you guys have alluded to here, there's a lot of, whether it's gender specific subliminal messaging, or even just across the domains of healthcare or whatever it is. I so appreciate that you guys are going out there and initiating these conversations, that you are seeking people out, that you are attempting to bring all of this together as a collaborative, because the more that we can talk to each other, the stronger we become. And I think conversations like this are what help give people permission to start having it on their own, but then also just brings the collective consciousness up.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. And I think we align a lot with like your thought process too for your business. And so that's why I was really excited to have you on the podcast, because I knew it would be like a winner. We're just here to start the conversation, like open it up, just like you said. And I think, we could go on a whole other note about like decreasing competition between professions and using each other. And that could be a whole other thing, but
totally.
So, thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to working with you in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to the Women Leaders in Sports Medicine podcast. This podcast is for you to take a step closer to your dreams. Visit www.womenleadersinsportsmedicine.com to join our roundtables, learn about our mentorship programs, and to let us know what you want to hear. Have a great day, and remember, it's your time to lead.